Welcome back. Today we have a 2011 Chrysler 200. Customer said they had a little bit of shake front end and took it out, test drove it, and it has a little bit of rotor shake. You can feel on the steering wheel when you step on the brakes pretty good. So we're going to pull these front rotors and take a look at them. I took a quick look at the brake pads through the wheel. I haven't had them off yet, and everything looks okay. I'm going to of course check that when I get the wheels off and take a good look at them. But I believe this just needs the rotors cut. If they can be cut, we'll measure them and see if they're thick enough to be cut. If not, we'll have to replace these rotors and fix this issue. I wanted to measure these real quick before I took them to get them cut, just to see where they are as far as how thick they are. There is a minimum thickness. It's 0.96 inches for this car. So I'm just going to put a micrometer on them real quick, just as a real rough. Hopefully you can see that. So I did this, and I did it in multiple spots around. Do it without pulling it off because it just messes it up. So right there, 1.03. So I have plenty on this rotor to be able to cut it, so you shouldn't have any problem cutting these. I've done this in multiple spots around this rotor just to make sure it's pretty consistent. So that gives me a lot to work with. So they should be able to cut these rotors without any problem. Stay above the minimum thickness, and then we'll put them back on. So we took these rotors. They were a little out of round. A little run out on them. You could feel it in a shake the steering wheel. These pads are fine. They're not due to be changed, but while we're in here, I'm going to separate the caliper from the bracket and clean all the hardware and re-grease the caliper and all the backing where any place where the back of the pad touches the caliper. We want to clean that and grease it so corrosion doesn't get in there. A lot of times you hear a squeal. That squeal is not the grinding of the pad. It's actually vibration between the backing of the pad and the caliper. So we're going to grease all that, clean this really good. There's no need to put new hardware on here because these pads aren't due to be changed anyway. They have a lot of life left in them. If we were changing pads and this was due to be changed, always change the hardware. I'll show you that in a little bit. But we're just going to take this apart and clean it really well before we put it back together. What you'll need for this, basically this job, is the wheel comes off with 19 millimeter. You need that's this. You need a 17 millimeter to get the caliper bracket off of the hub, off of the spindle. Actually, not the spindle. Actually, the hub, the steering knuckle. And you need 14 millimeter to get the slide bolts loose. I always loosen these first before taking the caliper off. It's just easier. And we'll need a wire brush or a wire wheel and a piece of Scotch-Brite. We're going to go in there. We're going to clean the metal, like I said, anywhere it's going to ride against the pad, the backing of the pad, and we're going to clean the hardware real good and re-grease. I use Ceramic Extreme Permatex brake part lubricant for my grease. I like it a lot. Works really well. That's basically what you need for this job. So we have the caliper already off. We're just going to take the slide bolts out. I've got them loose and undo them, pull them apart, separate the bracket from the caliper. These slide pins feel really good. They slid right out, really easy. They look good. Like I said, these are not really due for. So you notice right away there's a difference in the pins. This one has a plastic end on it. This one doesn't. So we just have to remember that the one without goes in this end, and the one with goes in there. It does matter, so we want to keep them, they go back in where they're supposed to go. So, here's the bracket with the pads. We're going to take that off. That's actually the top bolt. That's the one that has the plastic end on it inside there in the pin, because it goes like this. So we're going to clean this really good. We'll just take the pads out. You can see the circle there, that's the inner pad. You can see how much is left. I'll show you this really good. You can see how thick this is. There's a lot left here. These don't need to be changed. It's just the rotor that was having an issue. We'll take them off. You can see the hardware in here. Here's the hardware. We're going to go in here with a wire brush. I'll just show you that real quick. And we're going to clean these. Just go in there with a brush. These are stainless steel hardware. We're going to go in there and clean them really good. Get them all cleaned out. They don't need to be replaced. They're not in bad shape. They just have some brake dust and a little in there. Clean them out really good where that pad rides. So just pop them out. We're going to clean back in here with a brush and a Scotch-Brite or sandpaper you can use. Get all this corrosion. There's not too much in here. I'm going to get it cleaned out of there, and then we're going to re-grease behind the hardware and put the hardware back on. So you can see right in here, we're going to grease all where we just cleaned. We're going to grease in behind where the hardware goes, so moisture can't get in there and create corrosion. That's what we want to do. Don't need a lot, but you have to get it covered. Make sure it's covered well. Back on it. I'm going to check these boots while we're in here. I don't expect to find a problem with them because they're not that old. They look good. They're not dry. They're not cracked. Not crack. They're not cracked. They're definitely not crack. They're not cracked either. Okay, hardware's back on. I already said this goes on here like this. Sits on against this like this. And the top is the one that had the plastic pin in it. So we're going to take these pins, these slide pins, these are in really good shape. They're not corroded at all. Just clean them off. We'll re-grease them. When you grease these, you don't have to put a ton on here. In fact, a ton causes problems. You get too much grease in them. It kind of creates a hydraulic action. They can get hung up. We're just going to coat them. Make sure they're greased well. Okay. Just coat them. Same grease. That's the top one. It's good. Okay. So one of the other things we're going to do is we're also going to come in here and we're going to clean, as I mentioned before, anywhere that touches against the back of the brake pad, which is the piston here, the edge of the piston, and these two tabs on the outside of the caliper. We'll just wipe them down, and then we're going to use a piece of Scotch-Brite. These are pretty clean, actually. Not that old. Make sure they're clean. Piece of cardboard from over there. Okay, so they're just cleaned off. They're pretty good. Clean. We're going to grease them. Just have a little bit of brake clean here. Clean this off really good. Got a second to dry. It won't take long. And one of the other things we want to do, a lot of people don't do this, but you should, is this rotor sits against the face of this hub. And you can see there's corrosion around it already. We want to clean that up really good. And then we're going to grease that with high temperature grease. That keeps the rotor from kind of welding itself to the hub. And it just makes it easier if somebody else has to get in here and take that off. It won't be frozen to the hub, which happens a lot, unfortunately. So we're going to clean this up while we're in here, and then we'll grease this before we put it back together. Just make sure it's high temperature grease that you use for that. They do get hot from the brakes, so you really want to see the reading. I think you can see it here. NLGI number 2. Right there. You can see that. I like to use the ceramic anywhere. I don't use it on the hub face. It's not necessary, but I do like to use the ceramic brake grease anywhere in the caliper and in the slide pins. So I'm going to put this grease in there. I just killed my acid brush, but we'll just do it this way. Anywhere that rides against the back of the pad, the metal backing, grease that good. All this does is keep corrosion from starting and corrosion from pushing the pad around and causing a problem with the pad either locking up or vibrating and making noise. This just helps to keep that from happening. Simple to do, doesn't take very long, just need to do it. We took these rotors, got them cut today. You can see they're still pretty new, but it's very common for them to warp. We're just going to brake clean them off. You probably can't see me doing that, but I'm doing it. Clean them off, brake clean, wipe them down. Okay, same with the other side. I would clean the inside of these. These are really clean. They're not very old. And so I'm not going to worry about getting them clean because they're not rusty. Otherwise, I would clean them as well inside so they don't corrode. Put that on there. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to grease the face of this here. This goes against an aluminum wheel in the case of this car. and they have a tendency to have a chemical reaction to steel and the aluminum. So we're going to put grease on that as well. Keep that from sticking to it. Not a lot, just got to coat it. Anybody who's done these knows what I'm talking about, where you get one that's been on for a while and it's stuck. I've had them where you have to loosen the lug nuts a little bit and drive the car to get the wheel to break loose from the hub or break loose from the rotor. They're so corroded on there sometimes. That just keeps that from happening. It makes it easier on anybody else who's got to get in there. Bolts are in here already. You're not going to be able to see this, but there's 2 bolts, obviously, here and here on the steering knuckle. We're going to put this back in place. Get them started. You can do these by hand. I'm going to just do them with a gun. It's quicker. These I'm not going to do with a gun, 14 millimeter. I'm going to do them by hand. Put the pads back on. Outside pad. You should slide in there just that easy. Just squeeze them against the caliper. Squeeze them against the rotor like that. And we're going to slide the caliper back on. So one thing you want to make sure is you don't twist this line when you're putting it back on. I don't want to twist it up. It goes like this. Get my top pin here. Boots on the inside. Make sure you don't crush those boots. Line them up. Slide this back in. I'm going to put the top one in first. Okay. Get them started. Just the top one started. By hand. And the bottom. Be careful not to make sure the boot's lined up, the rubber boot. Get them started. Not hard. There it goes. Man, that was fun. That one did not want to go in there. I'm not going to tighten it up. I'm just going to snug it down. That did not want to go in there. Wow. Causing all kinds of problems for me. You too, huh? Come on. Just didn't want to go in there. There we go. Okay, you can see they gave me a little bit of grief. Didn't want to get started on there. Started by hand always. Make sure they're not cross-threaded. Give me a little bit of grief, but they're in there, tightened up. So that's pretty much it. We're going to put the wheel back on here real quick. I'm going to run them on with a gun, the lug nuts, but I'm not going to tighten them down. I'm going to wait till I get the car back on the ground, and I'm going to torque these to spec. I got to look it up. It's probably around 90 foot-pounds, but I'm not sure. I got to look it up and see what it is. Torque them to spec by hand when we're done, when it's back on the ground. That's pretty much it. Not hard to do. Like I said, these pads didn't need to be replaced. It was just a little add around, a little run out on the rotor, a little warp. We got that, took it to the auto parts store, got them to cut them for me, drew them up. Plenty of rotor thickness left to be able to do that. And these should be good to go. Shouldn't have any more rotor shake. Just snug them up for now. That's it. We'll put it back on the ground and we'll tighten it up back to spec. That's pretty much it. Real simple thing to do. Something you can do yourself. Just need a couple tools, like I said. 19 millimeter to get the lug nuts off. 18 millimeter for the bolts from the caliper bracket to the steering knuckle, and 14 millimeter to get the slide bolts out. A few other tools, right grease, brake grease, wire brush, Scotch-Brite or sand pad. That's all you need to do these. Pretty simple to do. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe this helps you out. If you liked the video, subscribe below, and thanks for watching.